I'm here with Susannah Scaroni, right? Is that how you pronounce your last name, right? You're basically an expert at this race, I feel like, already at this point. You've done it so many times. You won in 2022. You're just coming off of the Paris Olympics. You won, or you got silver in the 5,000, I think it was, right?
Yep.
So I just want to get your whole view on what these next few days, I want to first talk about this race. What are the next few days preparing for it going to look like for you? What's your usual routine? Does it differ because you're coming off of a stellar Olympic year, or is it just kind of the same mindset going into it?
Good question. First of all, I'll answer the second question first. New York City is kind of like a mini Paralympic marathon.
I'm going to block you from
there. We have such an amazing field.
Yeah.
It's a course that everyone I think is motivated to do absolutely their best on. So I will treat it as if I was treating the games. But as part of that, I am an athlete that's pretty relaxed going into races. And so I like to facilitate relaxation and peace. And so I like to go to bed early, read Lord of the Rings before bed. It's kind of part of my routine. Have some nice training in Central Park, enjoy the beautiful weather we have, and just kind of keep it low key.
Yeah. Kind of just treating it like you would want to spoil yourself in a relaxed sense, right? If you're going to work, this is your job, but if you're going to an office, you're not going to be stressing about taking on work every day. You're going to control what you can control.
Exactly.
You already know what you're doing too.
Yeah.
You're a professional for a reason then.
Yeah.
So do you kind of just let your body follow suit on what it's already known and what it's used to? And
exactly. And I don't like to take on a ton of obligations. So that's where I spoil myself with rest, kind of, like you said.
Yeah. Well, what are you reading right now?
I am reading Lord of the Rings. I am rereading Lord of the Rings. And so
rereading
that's
it.
what I'm reading. It's so fun.
Is that your relaxation to reread Lord of the Rings, or is it what you're doing right now and you went, all right,
I do like to read fantasy books as part of relaxation. And so it's kind of a both.
Have you read any of the ACOTAR series yet? The Throne Glass, I think, is the next thing that there is too. Those are supposed to be, I've heard nothing but I haven't read them yet.
I love that.
But
my recommendation.
There's a bunch of I don't know how many books there are for the ACOTAR series, but it's a court of thorns and roses, I think is
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be stellar. I've heard nothing but good things about it.
Cool.
So I would read that, or I think it's A Throne Glass, I want to say, is the other series too. So keep that in mind.
Thank you.
But I want to know too, whenever you just talked about kind of low key manifesting your own peace and your own little mantras, zoning in and honing in on keeping relaxation. When it comes to preparing for these races, and maybe New York City is a good example because you've won this before, do you just envision constantly what it's like or what it felt to cross that finish line and break through that tape?
Okay, that's a great question. There are times that I feel like I need to balance my energy with that kind of motivation, but normally, and I think I feel more comfortable with this, it's the marathon it's every single stroke, which is who knows how many strokes that is, or every step you're taking. And so I really try to focus on those small pieces along the way.
Yeah.
And try to get into an efficient breathing, efficient stroke, coming off my hand really well, and not think about the end. And that, I think, is where I like to keep my focus for the most part. There were times in Paris where I did try to build myself up with a little bit more thinking about okay, maybe do some visualization.
Yes.
Of those kind of things. It's not my go-to though.
Yeah, and I feel like that's such an interesting but such a spot-on way of looking at it, because one of my, I love doing Mile High Run Club. That's one of my favorite things to do. I'm a coach at a studio in New Jersey, and my head coach there, who is what inspired me to want to get into it, her whole breakdown, she does triathlon, she's done Ironmans, marathons. Her main mantra is, I don't run 26.2 miles. I don't complete a run, swim, bike race. She was I do everything bit by bit, mile by mile, minute by minute, because she's that's all you can control. If you get too overwhelmed or hyper focused on the big picture, it might become a little too overwhelming and unrealistic.
Yeah.
But if you're just focused in on how you're feeling in the moment, you're all right, what's next then? You just keep going to what's next, right?
Yeah. And I found that to be very successful. So, and it is
clearly.
Yeah. So I know it's doable. And so it's maybe some points in your life if you're like, okay, I need to throw in a splash of something different, which is like, let's meditate, visualize winning. But I do that very rarely.
Yeah, because I feel like that's important to know what your overall goal could be.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you also have to, race the race that you're in.
Yep.
You can't just get too overwhelmed by like what's to come or what's next, right?
For sure.
So now, like, speaking of what's to come, like, what does the day preparation look like for you? Getting to that starting line, hearing the gun go off, and even like the night, because I know it all starts like a week before, but like I feel like the main hyper focus is like the night before leading into the morning of. What does that look like for you, and what do you recommend not only to people who do this professionally, but people who are doing it for the first time?
Yeah, great. I personally like to just kind of know in advance like what I'm having for dinner that night, for example, and I like to eat early so that I can, if I want more later, like maybe have a snack before bed, or just know that like I'm gonna be able to go to bed early, because it's a super early start, especially in New York City when you're getting to Staten Island.
Yeah, it is.
So like trying to like do everything I can. I'll only have 1 cup of coffee on the day before racing, so that I can like maximize sleep, and then it's like planning out what I'm going to wear the next day, which I've already planned out. It's the beauty of traveling, so that's already ready to go. But like having a dinner I enjoy early on, so then I can just kind of like rest, relax, read, hopefully fall asleep early. Race day starts super early. I like to prioritize making sure I have caffeine. So I'm a big coffee person, so making sure I got coffee in the morning, which early starts does sometimes mean you have to plan that. So like I don't usually drink instant coffee, but having that available in case there's like coffee open. And then I know what I usually eat, so like eat that and bring like a Gatorade and a banana along with me, so that I can kind of continue to have more carbs while I'm prepping for start. And then I still try to be relaxed. I don't usually listen to music, but I do typically have music go through my mind. I'm a big fan of New York Times Games app, so like that's what I do on the bus ride, is like all the games.
I was gonna ask which one's your favorite.
I love them all, actually. So
me too.
Big fan of Wordle. I start with Wordle.
Yes.
That's like always
the classic.
So
Yeah, well that's awesome. And then, what are you expecting on the day of? I want to know like what is it that Sunday is going to look like for you in terms of, obviously you want to do great, but how do you make sure to also enjoy the race too? Because it's like one of the best days of the year, like whether you're a New Yorker or somebody coming in, I feel like the New York City Marathon is the best in New York City, which is like crazy because everybody's happy, stoked, and alive that day. And I want to know like what is it that you're going to do to make sure that you take everything in while also being focused on what the mission is?
Yeah, I think it's honestly that reminder. And I enjoy working hard, so I've already think that I have that innately, where I try to enjoy what I'm doing. I've had some times where I've had a lot of races, so I really appreciate when I'm there that day, when I'm feeling good, and when my equipment is working well. So I think I already have that. I do a lot of prayer as well before, like on the start line and during races, so I try to stay in the present moment, enjoy it. If there's a setback, I think I'm the first one to just like go into like, let's enjoy what we can do now. And I think that's also translates to success too.
Yeah. And is that what you would mainly recommend to everybody who is doing this for the first time? Would that be your number
absolutely.
one?
Stay in the present. For me, like I said, stay in the present. Those small goals, like what you can do now with your form, with breathing, with even mindset. Part of that can go into enjoying what's around you, and that gets you through a longer thing faster. And so do that, and I think you can't lose.
Yeah, a really long thing too at that as well. 26.2 miles of it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.